the Bread Kitchen. In this video I'm going to talk about mixing and kneading dough. So let's not waste any time and talk about a few basic principles of mixing. So let's start with the yeast. It's always good practice to add the yeast to the water before you add it to the flour. This is lukewarm, which means I can put my finger in and it feels just slightly warm. I'll then add in the yeast and mix it around and then leave it for 10 minutes to give the yeast a chance to rehydrate. Now I always use dried yeast in my baking, a couple of reasons really. First of all, it's extremely convenient, it sits in a tin in the cupboard rather than in the fridge and I don't have to feed it. But secondly, it's very difficult for me to find fresh yeast around here. The other good practice is to mix the flours and the salt together before you add the liquids. Here I've just got 500 grams of a good strong bread flour. Now when you're ready to mix, make a well in the centre of the flour and then add in all the liquid ingredients. This could be not only the yeast and water, but oil or eggs too. And then I love to mix by hand, so here we go. And I'll leave the camera running so you see how long it takes. Now at this stage, you probably think, it's not going to suck up all that flour, so I need to add more moisture. No, keep going. Rub your lump of dough around the mixing bowl and squeeze it to get the flour into the centre of the lump. Now start pressing down onto the flour that hasn't been incorporated. Just get the excess flour off my fingers. Okay, off we go again. Keep rubbing the dough around the inside of the bowl. And there we go. The dough is just very slightly tacky. So it took almost 2.5 minutes of mixing to get that dough to come together. It's really important to avoid the temptation to add extra moisture. Just stick at it and eventually the dough will come together. Now when you mix flour and water together, you form long strands of gluten molecules, and the purpose of kneading is to stretch out these gluten molecules in all directions. By doing that, you'll give texture to the dough and also the final loaf. If you don't knead dough enough, your final bread after baking will be quite dense. So here's my lump of freshly mixed dough. It looks kind of scruffy, not at all smooth. So here we go. Let me show you a few different techniques for kneading. One is the stretch and fold back, quarter turn, stretch with the heel of your hand, holding this end with your fingers, and then fold back, fold over, quarter turn, stretch, fold, stretch, fold. Now kneading should be an energetic exercise. You know, you really do need to put some effort in to pushing the dough apart. If you're just doing this for 10 minutes or so, you're not really kneading the bread, you're just playing with it. So get it down, push, push. And as you're doing this, you'll actually feel the dough start to change. It'll become almost silky in its feel. Another technique that you sometimes see people do is they'll put the dough down, they'll kind of press it out a bit, roll it back and press it out in the same direction again, and then give it a quarter turn. Push it out, roll it back, push it out in the same direction again. Now another technique I love, which is particularly good for sticky doughs or doughs with a high fat content, is a slap and roll. Slap the dough down, roll it, give it a quarter turn, slap it down, roll it, and all the time you're stretching the gluten question that pops up from time to time is, how do you know when you've kneaded the dough enough? When do you stop? Apart from the feel, which I can't really describe to you, the appearance is quite smooth, and if you push your finger in, it bounces back. That's a good start. Next thing is to cut off a golf ball sized piece of dough and try and pull it as thinly as you can. Stretch it in all directions and see how thin you can make it. And if you can see light through the dough without it tearing, and this is tearing, you see, it's getting quite thin, but it's tearing, so I need to knead this a little bit more. Now sometimes it feels like the dough's fighting back and it doesn't want to stretch. What I do in those cases is give it a bit of a slap, and then suddenly, whee, we're off again. Okay, I've been going 10 minutes. Let's see if we can do the window pane test this time. You can see the dough getting thinner and thinner and thinner. You can see my finger through the dough there, but you can see it's really, really stretchy. And that's what you want your dough to be like. I'll just knead for 1 minute to put that little lump of dough back into the main bulk. Right, we're good to go. I should say that it's really quite difficult to over-knead dough by hand. You need to be a bit of a man-mountain to do that. Now, I made a dough using plain white flour, but everything I've told you to date applies also to doughs using wholemeal flours. Now, whenever you see people do window pane tests, it's always on white flour, because it's very easy to do once you've kneaded the bread correctly. It's quite tricky to pull a window pane on a wholemeal dough, because all the little bits of bran provide places where the dough can tear. But you can do it with a little bit of care. This is a well kneaded wholemeal dough. It's stretching really nicely. Now, it may not look like a window pane to you, but if I just shine a light behind it, you can see how thin it is. You can see all the bits of bran in the loaf as well. Super! I bet that's the first time you've seen a window pane test with a wholemeal dough. I think it's important to say that you shouldn't get too hung up about the window pane test. It's a very good guide, but the more that you work with dough and knead dough, the more you'll be able to feel when the dough is ready without doing that test. If you want to see the window pane to its extreme, click on this link and watch me pull a bread dough into dough useful for apple strudel. So, some important things to remember from this video. When mixing, be patient and persistent. The dough will come together. And when kneading, it requires energy, stretching and turning. In the next video, I'll be talking about proving and shaping dough to make loaves and rolls. Thanks for watching, and do join me next time in the Bread Kitchen.